Hi, good morning to my friends in America. Good afternoon to anyone who's listening in Europe. My name's Meharg. I am a now retired former sales guy with 33 years on the clock in direct sales, but in a career that spanned 40 years. I've worked for mostly American corporations in a wide range of technologies around the world. I've seen and done a lot of things, and I've survived to have a happy retirement, which I'm now enjoying in this beautiful part of Scotland. And the best advice I was ever given was take the job you've just been offered in sales.
So what was the job? When did you learn this, Ian?
So this was back in 83, 1983, if anyone remembers that far back, if they were even alive back then. I was actually working for a US corporation down in England, who were the leaders in their field, which was polymer technology. And I'd come into this company initially working in procurement, and I was a buyer for 2.5 years. And the guy who was head of procurement was a very unorthodox character. The first question he asked me at interview was, "Have you got any experience in procurement?" And I went, "No, sorry, I don't." He said, "Great. We don't like people who've been in procurement before because we do things differently here." So I thought, "Whew, passed the first hurdle." But anyway, when I'd been there 2.5 years, he could see that I'd kind of outgrown the role, and he said, "Have you ever considered a job in sales?" I said, "What? Are you crazy?" He said, "No, no, I'm not." I said, "But you should go and talk to them." And he pointed me at a couple of sales managers in the company. And within about 2 weeks, I was offered a job. And I went back to him and said, "John, these guys want me to go into sales. What should I do?" He said, "Take it. You'll be great."
And there, and that was the start of a great
That was
sales
it.
career. That's cool. That's
Yeah.
that's really wow. That's really interesting. So that brings us to kind of why we're here today. So we had gotten a little banter on LinkedIn about the future of sales, and you said pretty plainly, like the future of sales is like sales. It's like here, and I'm like, hold on, like what do you mean? And so we went back and forth, and you made it really clear that the future of sales is in the past, and I really like that. So what does that mean, Ian? How do we approach the future by looking at the past?
Well, you could go from the macro, Phil, which is people who fail to appreciate history are doomed to repeat the mistakes that were made in history. And I think that kind of applies to sales too. And I said it initially tongue in cheek because I knew it was kind of counterintuitive, slightly provocative, slightly poking the bear, which is sort of my style. But it's absolutely true because what I've seen in the last 10 years or so on LinkedIn is a lot of people having this wow light bulb moment that they've just discovered something about sales that they never knew before. And I thought, whoa. Well, I knew this 35 years ago. So what took you so long? And I think what's happened certainly since the turn of the century, that the pressure on salespeople from above, from their managements, from the management's directors, from the shareholders down to the directors, for more and more short-term views and more results. We want more. We want it now. We don't care how you get it. Just get it. I think that is translated into a behavior pattern, excuse me, in a lot of selling organizations that have sort of lost touch with what the customer is all about here. So it's all about the selling technique. It's all about the process. It's all about the metrics, the number of calls you've made, all that kind of stuff. And at some point along the line, you say, "Well, hang on a minute. Isn't there a customer involved here somewhere? And where does he fit in all of this? And how do we deal with those people when we do finally find them? And we've beaten off all these 10,000 other guys who are all doing the same stuff that we are. And we finally got our meeting with the customer. What do we do now?" And so if you just set that idea to one side for a second and think, well, back in the day, back when I started doing this in 83, 84, we had none of this technology, right? It just didn't exist. There was no internet. There was no mobile phone. There was no Google. There was nothing. You had to do your work but by hand and on foot. You would walk out and you would have a paper directory and you would have a rotary phone and you'd make calls. But also there were a lot less people doing it. So you didn't have the feeling that you were part of this swarm, that the customer was heading towards the customer and you had to fight off all the other guys on the swarm. But what happened then was when you had those engagements with customers, there were a number of things that really stuck with me over a long period of time. And the number one was integrity, right? You had to be believable. You had to be able to show that you were a guy who could be trusted, your product worked, and that your company was a viable company, and that what you were offering was something that the customer really needed. You weren't trying to just ram stuff in because you had a target to meet that quarter, and if only they bought another 5-10 copies or 1,000 units or whatever, then you'd make your number. You didn't care about them. You had to do what was right for the customer. So integrity, trust, value were all the watchwords back then, and relationships were so important because that was all you had. There was no way you could send somebody an email because email hadn't been invented. You had to have that face-to-face relationship. You sat in their office, you talked to them like a human being, they talked back to you, they were open, they were honest, and you did the same with them. And that built that foundation of trust. And what I see now, Phil, is that has almost gone, or that it's so far removed from the point at which a customer makes a decision that a lot of people in the sales process now have forgotten how that whole thing comes about. And that it is based ultimately on trust.
Yeah. Yeah. So I agree with you, right? I think integrity, trust, and real value, I think, are cornerstones of what we do in sales. But your point about missing that because of whatever reason, but I think perhaps to your earlier point, the reason we lose that is because we make 100 or 200 or 500 or 1,000 outreaches and we don't ever talk to anybody. We end up so focused on I got to do more, I got to do more, I got to do more, that the expected outcome is failure or nothing, right? I mean, people don't answer the phone, they don't respond to voicemail, they don't respond to email, they don't talk on LinkedIn. I mean, they don't do anything. So how do we shift that back so that we can demonstrate that when often all we get is dead air?
Yeah, that's it. I think that is one of the biggest questions for the modern sales world, and because the technology has now enabled us to do so much more, so therefore people, and it's because you can do more does not mean to say you should do more. What you need, I think, is to first of all is to really focus on quality, not quantity. Yeah, I mean, let me give you an example of this. Most of the organizations I've worked for in sales had a requirement that, for your pipeline at any given point, you needed 5 times coverage, right? So if you had a target of $100,000, you needed an opportunity pipeline that showed that you had at least $500,000 in there, because they expected 80% of that would not work. So I asked myself, why would you go to all that trouble to fill your pipeline with 80% of stuff that is simply not going to work? It's use the British phrase, it's bonkers. So you think of all the resources that are tied up in marketing and SDRs and all the other people involved who are generating that 5x coverage, knowing that 80% of it is wasted. There's going to be wasted. And it's just to make up the metrics that are coming down from on high that says, we need more. And if you haven't got this amount in your pipeline, we know you're not going to make your number, because all they're looking at is the quantity, not the quality. I have a counter argument to that. I'd say, well, let's take away that multiplier, right? Let's say that you had to make your quota and you could only have 105% in your pipeline. What happens then? That means that any opportunity you put in there, you are going to be able to bet your children's life on it's going to fall. It's going to come in. But if you've got 5, if you can waste 80% of it, how much do you really care? You don't care which one comes in. And you know what? That whole attitude and that whole behavior transmits itself through to customers. So guess what? They don't care either. They don't care about you. They don't care about whether they return your phone calls. They don't care about whether they answer your emails, because they know they've got 100 other guys chasing them for exactly the same thing. But if you had to make your number, your target every quarter, every year, whatever, on 105% of what was in the target, just think how much more focused you would be on getting quality opportunities in there. Now, I know that there's going to be like, oh my God, you can't be serious, a reaction from a lot of people. And I think it would probably take 6 months to work its way through so that you really had qualified, high quality opportunities in there that you could say the day, the hour, the quantity, and you knew the guy who was going to sign it because you had met him and he'd committed to you and he'd done all the things you'd asked. Instead of, well, yeah, I've got this and that might happen, but maybe not. And I haven't spoken to that guy for 3 months. I don't really know what's going on there. And you know those kind of conversations you have in pipeline review meetings. Yeah. What if we did away with all of that? How much more productive, how much more valuable would we be to our customers?
Wow. That's so interesting as a concept of 105%, which basically means, to your point, right? Every deal that you have in your pipeline is going to close, which also means that's going to be my focus on adding value and listening and paying attention and trying to develop that. And I can tell you, for me personally, I guess I believe that 100% of the deals that I'm involved in, once they get to proposal, are going to close.
Yeah.
I believe that with all my heart. If I'm not, maybe before that might not be true, but if once I commit, like I'm in, this baby's going to close because I'm going to understand the needs. I'm going to understand the problems we solve. I'm going to understand who's involved in the decision, all those things. And that absolutely makes a difference. So, I mean, do you think that it's like a justification thing? I mean, why do you think that if that is true, that if we gave each prospect 100% effort and attention, that if that would either close, I guess, or it wouldn't, why do you think then that the focus is on 5 or 10 or 50 acts in a pipeline, Ian?
I think there's a little bit of herd mentality here, that people started to realize that, well, we need more of an insurance policy, right? Because if our target is X and we've only got X plus 5, 10, 15, 20%, whatever it is, then it only needs one deal to fall out and we're screwed. So people were thinking, oh, well, we need more coverage, instead of saying we need better coverage, we need better quality coverage. And so that whole thing amplified, and suddenly it's gone from 1.5 times to 2 times to 5 times. I've seen 10 times. And what that does is it takes away from the sales individual the opportunity to really work with his customers. All he cares about is getting numbers in, and I've been there, Phil. I've played that game. I've worked, I've loaded the dice in my favor. I've put stuff in my pipeline that was just pure fantasy. My manager knew it was pure fantasy, but it got the monster off our back. And because suddenly somebody says, we haven't got enough pipeline coverage. Right, all hands to the pumps. Let's get opportunities in the pipeline. Yeah, doesn't matter what they are. But suddenly, and the pipeline number magically rose. 2 months later, it magically disappeared again because none of those opportunities closed. When the end of the quarter, they were all flushed away down the toilet. So it's just a massive waste of time and energy and resource, not just for the selling organization, but a huge waste of bandwidth with our customers that we could be much better. We'd be much better off using much more productively to really understand their business issues, to really understand what value means to them, how they're going to get that business outcome that our product delivers, and working with them to do that over a period of time so that we become part of them and they are dependent. They trust us to keep on delivering, instead of this crazy nonsense. Every quarter we fill up the pipeline with a load of garbage, and every end of every quarter we empty all the garbage out, and we hope there's some edible food in there. And I think it's almost out of control. And I want to say we have to call timeout on that, go back to the start and say, right, let's get back to basics. And when you have a situation like that is, to me, spiraling out of control, the first thing you do is, you're in a hole, you're digging, stop digging. and then climb out of the hole and look around you and see where you are and figure out, okay, well, maybe digging this hole this deep isn't what we need to do, you know? So,
Yeah. No,
yes,
that's right on. That's right on. When you're in a sales hole, stop digging and figure it out. Right. That's great advice. I had a senior VP of sales once, Ian, who he on one hand he would say, let's be intellectually honest about our deals. And in the next breath would say, but we need 10x pipeline. Well, there's no way to be intellectually honest. I mean, I got to tell you, I can't keep track of 10 deals at a time. Even
no,
with a great CRM, I'm not keeping track of 10 deals. I don't know where they are. I don't know who the stakeholders are. I don't remember the problems. So in case I do get a call, like if my phone rings and it's one of my prospects, I want to know, like, oh yeah, hey, we talked 2 days ago. What's going on since then? Right? Has something changed? To do that, I don't want this great mystery out there because hold on, let me look you up in the CRM. Oh, let me see your story. Oh, I got to do this. So that's so interesting. So, what are some of the other principles and values, Ian, that you think that we need to bring forth to the future? Because you talked about integrity, you talked about trust, you talked about value. What else? Like, what are some of the other old is new, future type values?
okay. There's been there is a shift happening in the market, and you'll see it just as much as anybody else, Phil, who's kind of not completely asleep at the wheel, and that is the pendulum swinging back towards the buyer, right? And that's fine, and that pendulum is being blown by the winds of technology change that allow our buyers to find out more about us than we probably know ourselves, because they've got multiple sources of information to say, well, I'm looking to buy from this company and I want a product that does X, Y, Z. Oh, look, this is 5 other guys, 10 other guys, 20 other guys who all do the same thing. We probably don't even know that. We just know what we know. So that technology wind is blowing that power in that relationship and that knowledge and that pool of knowledge into the arms of the customer, which means they are less reliant on us than they used to be. When I started out selling, I was selling power cable accessories, right? Which are high voltage terminations that you stick on the end of a 33,000 volt cable to connect it to the grid, that kind of stuff. And our customers relied on me and my technical colleagues to explain to them how this stuff worked. They don't need that anymore, right? So I think the first thing that we have to do is when we stop and get out of the hole and look around us is ask ourselves, do we really, really know how our customers buy? And by how our customers buy, what I mean is, at what point in what we do they recognize the value that we bring, right? And the answer to and the way to understand that and to get a handle on that, because this is the single most important thing that I've learned in selling in 33 years, is the way customers buy depends on how they recognize the value that you bring. So first of all, if you were going to be successful selling to a particular customer, you have to understand that. And then you have to align how you sell and how you deliver your value to the way the customer recognizes the value. Because if you don't, they won't buy from you because you're either too early or you're too late. And the very simple way to do this is to ask this very, very powerful question. Does the customer understand the problem or opportunity? Not ask the customer, hey, do you understand your problem? But ask yourself, does the customer understand the problem, sub brackets, that I can solve? Or does he understand the opportunity to do something different with what I can bring? Right? And there's two answers to that: yes or no. And if it's no, then you haven't got a sale because he doesn't understand what you do. You're solving a problem he doesn't know he has, or doesn't believe he has, or hasn't seen yet. So is there a likely sale around the corner? No. So the way you have to deal with that is you have to educate them. You have to work with them, but not as a seller. You have to work with them as an advisor, a business advisor, because now you're having a conversation with the people driving the company, the CEO, the CFO, the CIO, saying, I want to understand your business. I know this, I know that. I believe that, you're in a couple of years' time, based on what I know, you are going to be hitting this problem, and help them understand what that problem is, how it's going to impact the business, what the upside is of solving it, and what the downside is of not solving it. And if you can do that, and you can take them on this path through this journey of how they buy, then you will probably prevail at the end. And that is what we call, or I call, a value created sale. You have to create the value because the customer doesn't see any value yet, because he doesn't know what you say. He's not interested in buying a product that doesn't fix a problem because he doesn't think he's got the problem, right? So that's for the guy who says no. For the guy who says yes, there are two possibilities. He says yes, and yeah, I understand this problem completely. We've fixed this before. We've got many suppliers of it, and yes, we're happy to talk to you. What I need is a really good deal, and I need it delivered tomorrow. Can you do that? Right? So that's kind of like a commodity thing, and it's what I call value offered. So you as a seller are basically offering value to the marketplace. We have these range of products, and this is what we do. And we will just sell you one when you need one. We don't need to go and talk to the CIO because he doesn't buy photocopier toner or chairs or laptops. He's not interested in that. But there are people in procurement who are interested in that, and that's our business. Now, the key thing is you do not get those two things confused, right? If you have got this fantastic idea that is a big, hairy, scary project to transform an entire business, you do not knock on the door of procurement. They will just throw you out. And equally, if you got a ton of stuff in the trunk of your car and you're selling them out of the car, you're not going to call on the CIO or the CTO. Now, in the middle is probably 80 to 90% of what business-to-business sales is all about, and which I call the value-added sale. So when the guy says, yes, I do understand my problem, and I do understand that there are some solutions out there from certain vendors, but I'm not really quite sure that I've got a full handle on this. I'm not really quite sure which of these solutions might be best for me, which of these vendors are going to give me the best deal. So I need to find out more. And they engage with the vendors, and you end up doing the usual sort of presentations, and discovery calls, all that good stuff, all the stuff that we think of as sales today, right? That is a value-added sale. But we mustn't forget that there's two other paradigms out there: the value created sale, which is when the customer doesn't know what you're talking about, and the value offered sale, where he says, yeah, give it to me now. I want it for $10 and I want it by the crate load, and you got to bring it this afternoon. Yeah. The bit in the middle is where most of the discussion around modern selling occurs. But to make sure that you are doing this correctly, you have to understand where you enter the buyer's decision-making process. And as a value-added seller, you're probably entering it quite close to the end, because you're entering it at the point where they've already decided what they need, they've issued a list of requirements, and you're now almost in contract negotiations and then down to the transaction. There's a lot of stuff that goes on before that you don't see, because you're not interested, because they can't make a decision to buy something. So there's all the ideas that are kicked around to solve various problems, all the business cases that are built to look at those problems, and then there's all the sponsors of those business cases internally who are competing for the same bucket of money inside the selling or the buying organization that your product might potentially get. And you might find that you never get to see the money because it's all gone to other guys who've bid more successfully for those funds. So there's a whole ton of stuff that happens before you engage the customer if you're a value-added seller. The smart guys get ahead of the curve. They don't wait for the customer to call. They're in there. They're building relationships. They're understanding the customer's business. They're finding out where the issues are. They're working with the users. They're working with engineers. They're working with project managers. They're working with finance guys. They're working with the developers, all kinds of things. And they're not there, obviously, to make a sale today. But they are building up, and they're picking up stuff on the radar, and they're starting to get a feel for where this business is about, what it's about, and who the players are, so that they can then come forward and say, well, look, I've been talking to you guys for 6 months, and I've noticed that your software development capability is lagging behind the market by about a year. In other words, it's taking you a year longer to get to market with a new software product than the best practice in the industry. Now, and I've looked at your revenues, and I reckon a new product out to the market is going to generate for you $1 million in revenue. So every year that you're late, you're losing $1 million or 10 million or whatever it is. If I could fix that for you and bring that 1 year down to 1 month, how much is that worth to you? 10,000, 100,000, 500,000? Different proposition. Yeah.
Yeah. Completely different conversation.
Yeah. But that all stems from how does the customer buy? Knowing what that process is, because it is actually consistent across most organizations in 6 stages, and you just need to know where you plug into it. And then asking that absolutely Mike Tyson knockout question, does the customer understand the problem? Most sellers go barging in without even thinking whether the customer understands the problem or not. So they flounder, they waste time, they are defocused, they're taking up bandwidth in the customer that isn't productively used, and so therefore they don't get the pipeline, they don't get the deals, and they go back and say, well, how did that happen? We had the best product, maybe, but you didn't have the best sales engagement. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's much more difficult and yet much more valuable, right? To your point about that. And that is an old school value. And that is when you're sitting across the table from someone and you have a relationship and they trust you, they're going to share things. And then they're going to introduce you to people that can help you learn more, that can help you complete the whole problem. So how do we, with that, how do we get that permission, Ian? 6 months, a year, 2 years before we need it? Is that a LinkedIn outreach? Do you create a user group? What's your thoughts on that? How do we get there?
Well, I'm going to go back to old school here, Phil, and that starts from basically taking off your sales hat. And there's a guy I'm sure you've seen on LinkedIn who I have huge respect for, Graham Hawkins, who's been at the forefront of this change towards buyer behavior. He talks about this thing called commission breath, and it's there. It's like garlic or alcohol. You walk into a customer and you are itching for a deal that week, that quarter, that year, or whatever. They can smell it coming a mile away, and they just shutters come down. They're not interested. If you go in, take off your sales hat, squirt the thing in your mouth, get rid of your commission breath, and start off by saying, I want to help you. I want to understand this. I want to bring in knowledge that I've learned from other customers who are in the same position as you. And I want to build that knowledge into something that you can leverage to your advantage. And if you can do that, and you don't have to start at the top. Everyone says, oh, you got to start with the CIO. Yeah, right. Well, that's nice, but most CIOs won't give you the time of day, because if we're talking about IT sales, which is my background, and you want to talk to a CIO, you know what the first thing he's going to do? He's going to check you out with his team. He's going to check your product out. He's going to check your company out and say, hey, I've had this guy Meharg calling me. He's pretty persistent, but it sounds interesting. What do we know about him? What do we know about the product? What do we know about the company? And if anybody comes back and said, yeah, we looked at that stuff 2 years ago, so it's crap. Don't go there. That's it. Game over. Right? So how do you avoid that? Well, you have to work with his team and the people who work in his teams. So you have to build your contact base from a reasonable level up. I always, when I was selling software development tools, I would go and talk to developers. Right now, I'm not a software developer. I do not understand these guys, but I'd bring a wingman with me who was a developer, and very quickly I let them have the conversation. So I was seen as being the guy who was bringing in expertise that the developers needed. And at the end of the day, they said, "Well, how do you guys do this?" And I said, "Well, we got this stuff. I can get you trial if you want. Would you?" And so we would just build it out really low key, and over a period of 3, 6, 9 months, suddenly you get a call from the IT director that says, "Hey, we've got a problem. I understand you might be able to help us. Can you come in now and talk to me?" And I haven't called the guy, but the people in his team have gone to him and say, "We've done enough research between us. We've all looked at it. We're the guys who are going to use this stuff. This is what we want." So you've kind of got to build it from the ground up. But at the same time, you've got to have enough credibility higher up. And I was very fortunate in being able to work for some very big companies like IBM, right? The one thing, IBM has a lot of characteristics, some good, some not so good. But one of the things you cannot accuse it of is not being able to get in to see the senior executives of the company. They will always take your call because you're from IBM. So, but I wouldn't do that as a sales guy. I would get someone 2 or 3 levels above me who was like a client director kind of guy who represented who was the customer's voice inside IBM. I would educate him and get him to go and talk to the CIO, so that when the CIO goes down to the people below him and they come up to him and they meet in the middle, what gets squeezed out is the information that they need, that we're the guys to talk to. Now, can you do that against a quarterly forecast with a very aggressive manager on your back? No, you can't. Not in Survive. So you've got to have this as a seller. You need to have a range of stuff that you're doing. Some of which is short cycle, quick fire. Yeah, there's a project going there. They'll take 50K off me. I'll just need to go and sell them 10 licenses. That'll be fine. But then there's the big stuff where you're doing a little bit of education, and then that buys you the time to build that relationship and to build that credibility. And that's where you have to have the messages are different for the guys who are on the shop floor, if you like, using the stuff, to the guys at the top who all they care about is, when's it going to happen? How much is it going to cost me? How much is it going to save? And what's it going to do for my career? If this big project is successful, how good am I going to look? They don't care what it is. As long as their developers happy, they don't care. Or they didn't. They might be.
Wow. Wow. So much to think about there. I love the idea of making sure that you have different durations of your sales cycles. So you've got some short, some medium, and some longer term, right? Maybe some aspirational type stuff in your pipeline. And I might say that the lower level stuff, sometimes the easier stuff, sometimes teaches you how the bigger stuff could work, right? We're always learning, we're always growing, we're always changing. So I like that, Ian. I think that's a great suggestion, great idea. So that's, if we're getting started there, is there something that you have found, like a periodical or a book or any resource for folks that are getting started? You did sales for a very long time. Is there something recently that you've read or watched or learned that has been super helpful that you'd encourage, if they're a young in their career seller, that they get started with?
Well, there's a couple of things, and I will do a little sort of commercial at the end, but there are some fantastic guys on LinkedIn, and I say this tongue in cheek, and they won't mind me saying it, but bizarrely, some of the best are actually Australians. Now, I love Australia. I love Aussies. They're great people, and they don't take themselves too seriously, which is great. But for some reason, there is this little group of people in Australia who are absolutely at the leading edge of this. Graham Hawkins, John Smybert, Steve Hall, Wayne Maloney, Ken McLaughlin, all of these guys are absolute thought leaders, and everything they produce is gold dust. So I would say, and they're not all as old as me. Ken's a young guy; he's only in his 40s. I mean, John's older than me. He's got less hair as well, which is great. But the rest of them are people who've had a very solid career in if you like, traditional old school sales, and now they've morphed and moved and are able to apply those values and those ideas to how things should work in the modern world. So I would first of all encourage anyone who's looking around for, I hate the words role model, but these guys will give you more insight and more input into what really works than any training course you can ever go on. And it's not just Australians. There are some great guys in the US as well. There's some others around Europe, all of whom make fantastic contributions. And those are people that you should listen to and learn from. But you also have to be selective, because not everyone has a broad focus. Some people are very narrow. They only do one thing, but they do it incredibly well. And that kind of brings me on to the commercial, because when I got towards the end of my working life, which seems like a lifetime ago, but it was actually only 5 years. A lot of people said to me, "Ian, you should write a book." I said, "Come on, nobody wants to read about me." He said, "No, no, no, not about you." Oh, all right then. I said, "What we like is all these stories you tell us. And what they're talking about is the war stories, the examples you can talk about of, oh, well, there's this guy who did this and I did that for him. And usually there's a punchline to it. Or it's like, oh my God, did he really do that? Yes, he did. And I said, you should write a book about all those war stories. And I thought, yeah, I do have a lot of them, and I do tell them. So I thought, okay, how am I going to get that across so that it's not just a book of stories, right? And it's not just, this is my career. I started off doing this, and then I did that, and then I moved there, and and I wanted it to be very useful to people who were already in sales, but maybe wanted to get better or wanted to move on or move up, and people who were thinking about it, but hadn't made that call yet. So I decided, and because I had literally been pushed into sales, I decided to call it the unintentional salesman. I never set out to be in sales. And I have this view, Phil, and I might be wrong in this, that nobody ever wakes up in the morning and in their teens or their early 20s and said, you know what? I'm going to be a sales guy. I don't think they do that, because if they knew the reality, they go, no, I'm not going there. So I thought, well, I got into this unintentionally. I've had a fantastic life out of it. I've made some good money. I've made some fantastic friends. I've made some both colleagues and customers, and I've had some great experiences around the world. And if I was to do it again, I'd do it again if I had the chance. So I called the book The Unintentional Salesman, but the subtitle is the real giveaway, which is all the things you ever wanted to know about sales, but couldn't be arsed to ask. And I realized that there were loads of things that I never knew at the time that had I known about them, I would have asked, or I should have asked, but I didn't know, so I didn't ask. And so I thought, okay, what are the top 20 questions? So the book is basically 20 questions. And I've done no academic research. I have not interviewed anybody. I've not sought anybody else's opinion. This is all my own experience, because everything in the book, I either did it, or it was done to me, or the bullet hit the guy next to me. So so there's a lot of good practical stuff in there, a lot of stories. It's not all serious. Some of it's tongue in cheek. One of the chapters is entitled, "I've just closed a big deal. Should I buy a Porsche?" And the answer is, absolutely, you should buy a Porsche. They're great cars. But if you don't want to be seen as a complete knobhead by your colleagues, maybe buy a BMW instead, because back in the day, Porsches were, came with this association that it was only, traders in the city who could afford them, and they were loud and obnoxious. But, so little things like that. It's a good read. And anyway,
Ian, where do we get it, man? Where do we get a copy of your book?
It's on Amazon. But I've hidden it very well, because I didn't write it under my name. I have a pen name called Glenn Coe, and it's because my email address, as you know, is Lord of Glen Coe. And people say to me, "Are you really Lord Glen Coe?" And I said, "Yes, but no." "Is that a real title?" "Yes, but no." And for the benefit of our American friends, you can actually buy a title like this, and it costs about $40. Right, and you can become a lord, and for $40, and get a certificate that says you are Lord Phil Gerbyshak, and you can call yourself Lord Phil. I got one. My sister bought it for my 60th birthday.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's how it all came about and all got started. But since then, I've always had this very strong desire, Phil, that I wanted to put something back into the world that I've been part of for the last 40 plus years in business. I've learned a huge amount along the way for some of the best people, the biggest brains, the brightest talent, the hardest workers, the funniest guys and girls, and some of them have been absolutely hilarious and outrageous. And I think I can't just keep that to myself. I need to share this, because when people see what you can get out of a career in sales, even if it's something you never thought you would do, or something you thought you didn't want to do, or you were afraid of doing it, I would just say to you, if you get the chance, take it. Because I was given the chance, I took it. No regrets.
Yeah, great advice. So, friends, if you're listening, you're watching, you're thinking, what the heck? Go get a copy of Ian's book. It's under a pen name, Glencoe, GLENNCOE. The book is called The Unintentional Salesman. I did find it on Amazon. You can pick it up. It's $12.99. It's worth every penny. I'm sure
Yeah.
the stories are great. I can't wait to read it. Ian, you're the best, man. Thank you for spending some time with us today. I really appreciate it. Yeah, and folks, if you're listening, you're like, well, I want to get more at Ian, find him on LinkedIn. Just search for Ian Meharg, IANMEHARG, and get to know him. He's got a lot of experience, even though he's the unintentional salesman. If you see a chance, take it, my friends. Thanks so much, Ian. Great stuff, man.
Well, thank you, Phil. It's been absolutely an honor and a pleasure to talk with you and to use this fantastic technology to speak to you in Florida from the gorgeous Highlands of Scotland as if we were sitting across a beer in a bar. That's great.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to go and have the beer now.
There you go.
It's nearly 6 o'clock. It's beer time. It's Miller time.
There you go. Cheers.
Take care.